What is it you truly desire? Do you wish for the power to shape the world? The power to save a loved one from a terrible fate? The chance to twist the unbendable truths of the world after they'd already been decided? Life, death, weakness, love, all at your command. Tell me, dear adventurer, would you take that deal? What if it came with risk or stipulation? Years of your life, the soul of your firstborn, your left hand, your little dog. Would it stop you? Or would you still, no matter the cost, take the deal? That and so much more is what we're here to talk about. Yes, your favorite magpie is here to help you really mull over why you need to add more deal makers into your stories, your worlds, your campaigns. We'll touch on the overarching angles in which most players would want to see deals be made, an abundant amount of places to derive inspiration from, and probably end it off with something completely 100% magpie certified original and fresh for your world building muses. Let's spend a real quick minute or few to really think about Magpie. What in the world are you talking about? Well, this is my humble contribution to Monster Week, the week where all your favorite, least favorite, and unknown TTRPG tubers all get together to talk about the same monsters. This year's being the Fae. But when I hear Fae, I can only think about my favorite thing about the Fae. Their business in dealing, their tools and tricks and trade. And it's something they share with countless different types of monsters. So without further ado, let's read the terms and conditions on our deal makers and get started. I think it's worth taking a quick moment and determining exactly what I mean. I mean some sort of person who makes a deal, but that could be any quest giver or shopkeeper or any social interaction when you get down to most of the broad terms of what it means to be part of a deal. But we all know that's not what Mags is talking about, don't we? Yes, my clever adventurers. I'm talking about when fantasy makes these stories, these deals, and their payments magically binding. These are all throughout fiction. I can hardly think I need to spend any time really explaining what I mean by magically binding agreement, so I won't give you too many examples. You're gonna have to wait until I get to that part in inspirations later on in the video, in this very video. However, I think the next question I do want to give a bit of attention to before getting onto the meat and potatoes is exactly who is capable of doing such a dealing. Well, that's going to be a matter of world building. Pact magics and bargains are often seen as something innate in a lot of monsters or creatures. Whether fae, fiends, or celestials of certain flavors, the deal makers have some capability of making a pact or contract that is enforced throughout the magics that keep the world going round. However, I've always found it to be a touch limiting. Why can't an undead make a bargain? Because they do, or perhaps a construct, a dragon, all of them, capable of these oaths of the arcane dealing. At least in how I see the upper powers of any given monster type. It is exactly that which I want to hone in on when you're considering who can be a deal maker. They should have some importance or consequence in the world. They don't all have to be gods or world-ending threats, but they should have meaningful impact and existence in themselves or connecting to a greater magically binding force. So if you have a vampire, think Dracula, or think about how fiends and fae are connecting to the overwhelming magical realms of the Hells or the Feywilds. Or if you're whimsical like me, you just call it fairy. Perhaps that's enough time to consider the concept of our deal makers. Let's get again to that meat and potatoes of it all, if you will. Why do players make a deal? What do they truly desire? Aside from regularly scheduled D&D campaigns, no one is really able to pay the price for that bargain. We can't possibly be covering every single reason, so sit back and relax as Mags is going to tell you about some of those common general ones as someone who is an enjoyer of the trope can define. First up, you have perhaps the most straightforward route to any of these bargains, the gaining of power. That's sometimes raw strength, perhaps an ally against a greater evil, but perhaps that's also information. There's numerous times where the deals made with these powerful beings really come down to the amount to
I know something you don't know.
Because, as we know, knowledge is power, and that's why I want to lump raw knowledge in with general amplification of abilities or access to resource, the gaining of advantage that wasn't previously there through a transactional resource. However, perhaps we aren't looking for a simple boost, so if that's not your bargaining style, then consider the shortcutting of an objective. Sometimes that's what knowledge is, sometimes that's what you need the power because you don't have the time or resources to go and get it for yourself. However, there's no reason that this fiend can't, there's no reason that this whimsical archfey can't. Just to have a small interlude with this video being for Monster Week, allow me to tell you about my favorite dealmakers in TTRPG, because along with the Fae, that lumps in hags, the beautiful in-between of Fae and Fiends, depending on the type of coverage or the starter Pokemon you choose, frankly. Seriously though, are you kidding me? These are probably one of the best, most impactful, dynamic NPCs you could possibly imagine. They could be campaign villain, they could be excellent grounding forces in your background. They could be an unlikely ally, begrudgingly made in a moment of need of the party of adventurers. These are the options that are brought to players in their weakest moment, when they feel powerless and in the need of whatever help they can get to change the odds by just 1 or 2%. Where does that bring us? Well, back to the shortcut. It offers the impossible a probably better option, right? Perhaps you make a deal to figure out the first half of the true name of the demon or the village that your party's greatest villain is hiding away his family in. This is most impactful when one of the resources the villain is trying to leverage against the party is time. When time is pressure and time is a resource just as much as spell slots or hit points, time becomes something worth bargaining for. The shortcut might be a quite literal. The hag could offer a teleport that the party's too low level to have at their access. Perhaps the Fae uses their magic and knowledge of their domain to ensure safe travel across the realms of the orderly and chaotic Feywild. A shortcut planned is always going to be feeling a bit better as a storyteller because you didn't prepare a bunch of stuff that's gonna get bypassed at a moment's notice. All because Kevin decided he was gonna get clever and rolled impressively well. So don't be against making your players feel rewarded because they bypass troubles and trials, because, well, you planned for them to go this route, because you put such a tempting offer in front of them, one they could not refuse. However, what if you're not looking at power or worried about moving the story any quicker? What other possible appeal could these dealmakers offer player and storyteller alike, beyond shortcuts, beyond power, and beyond hags? What else is the appeal of the bargains, the deals, the pacts? That's simple. You get to break the rules. This is perhaps where some of our fiendish and Fae friends excel as NPCs to really move the story along in manipulating and pushing forward what the players and characters need or want. I'm not kidding. Pact magic, it should be done in a sense that's very, very flexible. This isn't alchemy. There are not easy equations that can fix fair rates or transactions. Mostly. Probably. We'll talk in a bit about some of those ideas a little later on, so hang tight. What do I mean by breaking the rules? It largely means that nothing is wholly off the table. There is a price for any problem. I hesitate to allow outright ruin of your narrative, but think in a way of tempting players by giving them exactly what they want. Really, that player who regrets their dump stat being the stat they need to be good at half the things their character is made to do, because they wanted to make a gag character and didn't realize there were consequences to their action. I digress. Swap stats, rework skills, give characters new abilities, magical items, help them come to realize the character as they are willing to pay the price to get there. You tempt players with exactly what they want. Not every deal has to be threaded in-game talk between characters. After all, player and storyteller are on the same page. Work on beings being able to see the weaknesses laying just underneath the skin of the character. The hag approaches the party. I can see you've had some more troubles than triumphs due to your inability to properly see your surroundings. I can help open your eyes, but it comes at the price of your own. The hag is willing to trade the player's eyes for a +5 to investigation, perception, and insight rolls, since they'll now have the hag's eye. What does the hag need these eyes for? Well, that's for them to worry about, and for the party to probably find out in a good number of levels from now. But better watch out on being in holy place for too terribly long, or you're probably going to have an itch you can't scratch because it's at the back of your eye. Oh boy, you're in trouble if you try and wash them with holy water, I can say that much. Now, we've talked about why people wheel and deal, but let's hop on the train to Inspiration Station, because I think there's a whole heck of a lot of inspiration for where you can take ideas from media and really twist them and make them your own. The most common is giving power. The Ghostwriter generationally makes deals with the devils. Sasuke had the unwilling curse mark placed upon his body, which drove him to seek power and mentorship from Orochimaru to have the strength to beat Itachi. Vegeta faced temptations of Bibbidi Bobbidi and Boo of sorts when he chose to become Majin Vegeta. Do I even need to introduce Faust? I don't want to. He's a bit over-talked to whenever it comes to fiendish bargains, and for good reason, but I'll excuse myself from needing to cover his particular genre of bargains in detail. Plenty of other videos out there for you to go and learn. Beyond the power that usually gives you some sort of form change with your terms and conditions, maybe you want a pact that is a direct passing of a powerful item. The Death Note, the Helmet of Naboo. This can be a whole main pressure or plot of a whole campaign. The exposure to powerful items, I should say I do have a video talking about artifacts of greater power in the near future, and it should be able to cover some of these powerful moments, so I won't dig in too much now. However, all dealings of business, this should help you realize one key thing: pacts, deals, terms and conditions, clerics, warlocks, paladins, and depending on how you flavor some of your other classes, they'd be there too. Many of our favorite classes are already wrapped in such deals, so you already have dealmakers built in when you have these characters present. Perhaps a patron's master, a rival or fellow warlock, a cleric's archangel, saint, or another celestial, or someone who takes the same oaths as your holy knights do. Take advantage of those built-in hooks. But beyond power, whether that be power-ups or artifacts, let's look at another route for inspiration. Yes, there's the great undo button, as I'll call it. I could talk for a very, very long time about Spider-Man One More Day, and acknowledge it as one of, if not the most damaging piece of superhero media to the long-term legacy of a character in a modern comic history. But what it does do is present the impossible situation. The general question that the whole point of this video is trying to address. What are you willing to sacrifice, endure, or suffer to save the life of a loved one? Because One More Day, to the best of my memory, is also what acknowledges that you don't actually want deals of the souls of heroes, because a hero giving up their life to save someone else is noble, and they feel at peace with that. They're already willing to do that. Or you could be Strahd von Zarovich and just bring back that lady that your brother was going to marry because you fancied her and you decided you were going to make it everyone else's problem. Both of these are instances in which you're trying to turn back time. Both directly, in these instances, bringing back someone to life or from the brink of death. I can think of countless examples of times characters have been in these moments when their world is coming to an end around them as someone precious to them is dead in front of them. And they reach out to anyone interested. And they reach out to anyone listening.
Take me instead, you raping bitch!
However, power that bolsters one's existence, or power to get a second chance on life for a loved one, are not your only option. There is another direct line for inspiration, and that's in bargains and deals that come into the light of a setting of matter of prizes and pride. We all know about that time that the devil went down to Georgia because he was looking for a soul to steal. He was in a bind because he was way behind, and he was willing to make a deal. But Johnny has no real reason to take on the devil outside of the fact that he knew he was better. So he knew he'd win. Free golden fiddle. This leads to a different element of characters that can come up. The deal can be made as a challenge or a gamble, and frankly, that's honestly also completely valid, but does need to come with additional safeguards and probably wiggle room for when and if things go south. I didn't want to bloat out every little deal option, but keep your eyes open for where contracts can be placed. Another one that I don't think particularly fits directly here, but it's most helpful here, could be Doctor Strange's first movie, and how the newly appointed Sorcerer Supreme deals with the Dread Lord in his own domain and dimension, Dormammu, and how he beat him with the rock and the phrase,
Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
Such a powerful way of dealing with such an otherwise unsurmountable villain. It's almost cool enough to forgive what an ugly CGI design they gave to such a cool designed character in the comic. All of this to be said, don't be afraid to offer your players challenges, gambles, and wagers to really put things on the line, but give them considerable rewards, wanted rewards when and if they're successful. Also, don't be afraid to put the bargaining powers in the hands of your players. I think that's generally an underappreciated element. I know Jay Martin at Play Your Role goes over something like this in his video about Dealmakers, what with the power of letting a player be a dealmaker can look like, but even in a general sense, allow players to bargain with binding magics. That's a lot of inspiration and places to run with for ideas. What about different types of bargains? Yes, we all know you can sell your newborn souls, or your barbarian's soul, but why aren't there other forms of pacts? Why aren't there countless different types of loans like there are in the real world? Why not bring that from the real world to your Dungeons and Dragons campaigns and fantasy stories? Some thoughts I've had are Arcane Pact for knowledge certainly seem close to the sugar daddy relationship that can occur with warlocks and clerics, but those you serve a direct purpose. I was thinking loans more closely to student loan, ones that maybe you don't have to pay for until you graduate. For example, I'm thinking about a loan with a hag. I wish for the arcane knowledge to become a wizard when I grow and excel to expand my spellbook. Once I've reached the 5th level of spells, I shall always siphon those magical spell slots to you in the morning. And boom, now your wizard has a reason to have no backstory of higher education, but instead found a way to cheat along the path. Or heck, that could be a way to expedite some multi-classing. A hag makes a bargain for each party member to be making a restricted version of a class level where the growth happens quickly. I mean, the story potential to allow a party to make a bargain and then be able to become at least functional enough to disguise themselves as a different class, or bargain to have a player swap classes if that's something they've wanted to do. Remember what I've said earlier, you can use binding pact magic to play with whatever rules you need to. I also think of car loans and mortgages, two different types of smallerish payments or lowerish interest rates, where the payments are long and over time. These are loans that can't and shouldn't break your campaign, but they should be considered because your characters should be able to make promises and pacts in a world for periods of time that go beyond what the campaign's life cycle might be. You won't have a hag denying a lifetime's worth of bargaining in debt because the campaign won't run that long. This is going to be a silly little tip, but if what the party member is looking for isn't too outlandish, why wouldn't the hag maybe take 1 hit point of the player every day for the rest of their lives, or for 30 years, or a debt of 5 gold every month for the next 10 years? This allows these creatures, these pact-making powers, to make smaller but meaningful deals. Not every bargain needs to be life or death, or life-changing power. Another option for these types of rules is collateral. What can a player offer to make these pact makers bring to the table, and offer that isn't present or isn't available for full bargaining and only available if things fall through? Castles, bloodlines, magical abilities of the soul of the party wizard, the strength of the spirit of the barbarian. Is it something to really muse over and consider? I don't want to go too far into this because I don't want to hold you all hostage for too terribly long. However, where does this leave us? Well, me with a mostly complete video and the general pledge that if you enjoyed it, do the YouTube things. If you want to support me, consider becoming a YouTube member or joining the Patreon. I plan on building something special for Monster Week on the Patreon, so go and check it out. But outside of that, I hope you have safe travels, friends, as Feywilds can be a dangerous place to get lost. So thanks again for watching, and remember, always magpie responsibly.